Hello and welcome to the SANS APAC webcast series, Trust No One, introducing SEC530 Defensible Security Architecture. My name is Ruby Souza and I will be moderating the webcast today. Your presenter is Eric Conrad. Please feel free to submit your questions at any point by using the Questions tab, and a brief Q&A portion will take place at the end of the webcast. Thank you for your attention. Now let me turn the mic over to your presenter, Eric Conrad.
Thank you, Ruby, and welcome everyone to the webcast. So just a little background on this course and the concept of defensible networks, defensible security architecture. So SANS years ago had a course on firewalls, 502, and we retired that course, and it was the perimeter security class. And when we retired it, the course author left, and it didn't have a champion, and it wasn't up to date anymore. And so we had a hole in the curriculum for architecture, security architecture. And I'll talk about security architecture and how it compares with network architecture. They're related, but they are a bit different. And so we had a big hole in the curriculum for an architecture class, and 530 has now filled that hole. It is a totally different class in 502, if you're familiar with that. Brand new class, all new slides. It's just, it took, the firewall track was very specific to firewalls. It was also called perimeter security, and the perimeter is now dead. And so yeah, it's much, much broader. This is, security architecture layers 1 through 7. So everything from cables to data, and literally everything in between. And I wrote it along with Justin Henderson. It was a real passion project for me and Justin. And I'm absolutely thrilled to see it taking off the ground. We've had 3 runs so far. And taking it, I'm going to be in Vegas in under a week, teaching it there. And then I'll be in Singapore in October, and then in Sydney in early November, doing the same thing. So a little bit about us. Justin is lead author of 555, Tactical SIM and Analytics, 530 and a 455. He's a GSC, as am I. I'm co-authored a few classes, and I'm a co-curriculum lead along with Seth Meisner of the SANS Blue Team curriculum, SANS's newest curriculum, one of the newest curriculums, focusing on the blue team. Blue team, of course, being defense, red team being offense. Red team is things like penetration testing and things like that. Blue team is defending against all that good stuff. And, so I talked briefly about the concept of a perimeter, and the perimeter is dead. If you have a perimeter-based mindset, that's a very 15, 20-year-old mindset. The idea that you can build this secure firewall, sort of analogous to a castle wall, and keep all the bad things on the outside and all the good things on the inside, and think along the lines of insides trusted, unsides untrusted. That's a very 15, 20-year-old mindset, and we need to move away from that. We need to move towards what's called zero trust. And the idea of, I don't particularly care where that device is, inside, outside, etc., nothing's automatically trusted. Zero trust in the end state means filtering between every interface in an entire organization, which of course is going to be quite challenging for many of you, many of us. That's the end goal, but don't let perfect get in the way of good. So just because you can't reach a perfect solution of, full filtering between every single interface, there are some big steps you can take along that way to at least narrow that gap. And so back in the 90s, late 80s, Bill Cheswick, and I'm not knocking Bill Cheswick for saying this, it was a perfectly reasonable statement to say it's a soft, crunchy shell around a softer center. We call it the candy bar design. Now, in 1990, when firewalls had literally just been invented a couple of years ago, that was a pretty reasonable statement back in 1990. It's no longer reasonable anymore. The idea that you could just harden a perimeter and secure the things on the outside and not worry about the things on the inside, well, those days are long, long gone. But we still see corporate networks designed this way. I am familiar with a number of Fortune 100s in the US who have a globally flat network. Now, we define flatness in a few different ways. When I talk about flat, I'm not talking about VLANs per se. I'm talking about filtering. And we'll talk about VLANs and all kinds of other fun stuff. And VLANs are a good thing, certainly. And segmenting at layer 2 and layer 3 is also a good thing. However, you have to have filtering. And if I can break in any PC on a network and then reach, say, TCP port 445 and any other PC on that network is too flat. Irregardless of how many layer 2, layer 3 filters you may have, or segmentation you may have, we need filtering between devices. And there's a number of different ways to do that, of course. But if I could break in any system or reach any other system on, say, TCP port 445, that's SMB, famously abused by things like PETIA, not PETIA, Eternal Blue, things like that, you can have catastrophic failures. And I'm familiar with a number of Fortune 100s, 500s in the US that have essentially a flat design, meaning no filtering. And we need to move beyond that, right? And so I want to be clear on what we mean by security architecture. Now, some people see the word architecture and just stop reading and say, oh, network architecture, like you're going to teach me how to design networks globally. We're going to teach you how to secure networks globally. And so this is not a network design course. It's a security architecture course. So the idea for security architecture is described right here in the next, and we'll talk about this. It's security at every layer. Layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4, all the way to layer 7. I'm not going to go through the OSI model here, but layer 1 is, cabling and things like that. Layer 2 is switches, layer 3 is routers, and on the way up, right? And you secure it at every layer. And it turns out you can remove huge amounts of attack surface by simply hardening every layer. So we go through the security architecture, which is, of course, it goes along well with network architecture, but this is not a class for designing global networks. It's a class for securing networks, right? Architecting networks to be resilient at every layer. And some of the recent attacks we've seen, including the destructive malware fueled by the alleged NSA hacking toolkit. There's a bunch of tools that allegedly leaked from the NSA in the US, and Eternal Blue, MS-17010. Those are now in the hands, of course, of criminals and many others, and those are being weaponized, and they've caused billions of dollars in damage. Large shipping company, international shipping company was hit by a couple $100 million US, a large pharmaceutical company, and we've seen literally billions of dollars of losses due to this weaponized malware. And sometimes people call this stuff ransomware. A lot of it's not actually ransomware. Ransomware implies you can pay a ransom and get your data back. That's not what's happening here in many cases. In many cases, it's just simply destroying your data. There's no ransom to be paid, it's just gone. And we'll talk about how these things move and how these things propagate on a network. And strong security architecture largely mitigates most of the attack surface for these things. And what's nice about these concepts are, I'm not going to ask you to buy a whole bunch of new products. Now, at the end of the day, there may be a gap analysis. We have to buy more products, but usually my clients have they bought enough stuff already. Let's just reconfigure what you have. Let's reconfigure what you have to do a better job. Now, at the end of the day, if we do that and you still have gaps, perhaps then we'll need to buy some more stuff. But it's never my first suggestion to buy more stuff. I just go to my clients and I say, listen, let's just reconfigure what you have, retune it, reconfigure it, and make it better. And then at the end of the day, there's still a gap, we'll address the gap then. So this is Richard Baitlick. Richard Baitlick is the godfather of the blue team, as I call him. He came out of the Air Force in the US. He wrote the Tao of Network Security Monitoring, which is a seminal book. Any blue teamer should have this book on their bookshelf. And he talks about this term called defensible networks. Now, it's not my term, it's his term. He actually thanked me on Twitter when he saw that we called this class Defensible Security Architecture, and I was quite embarrassed to have him thank me. I said, no, I need to thank you. And he made his points about defensible networks. They can be watched. They limit an intruder's freedom to maneuver. That's important. They offer a minimum number of services, and they can be kept current. And this is the DNA now of what we're talking about here. And that book dates to 2004. It is admittedly a bit older. It's 14 years old now, but it is solid gold. You should have it on your bookshelf or perhaps in your Kindle. And when you read a book like that, don't get stuck on the tools, because obviously 14 years ago, tools were a bit different. We didn't have Wireshark then, we had Ethereal then. But don't get stuck on that. Don't think about the tool, think about the technique. He has a newer book called The Practice of Network Security Monitoring, which is wonderful. He then updated the concept of defensible network architecture. And these networks can be monitored, inventory, controlled, claimed, minimized, assessed, and current. And I'm not sure where you folks work or what industry you're in. I've run my own company for 10 years now plus, but my previous job before I ran my own company was I was a security officer at the second largest healthcare provider in New England. So the second largest healthcare provider in New England, in Boston now. I was there, what's called a HIPAA security officer. That's the US regulation governing healthcare. And we, 12,000 employees, a 3-state WAN, probably 20,000 nodes on that WAN. And I tried to do this. And one of the things I found was simply, you need to have what a government person might call a data owner. That's very important. You need to identify all your data, all your systems, and you need to have clear corporate ownership of each. Because if you don't have clear corporate ownership of each, meaning someone's responsible, at least from a corporate perspective of protecting it, it may not get protected. And what I've noticed is lots of people love to ignore the cost of protecting data. Now, if there's any questions, just type them in, and what I'll do is I'll check them at the end, okay? So I'll try to leave 10 minutes at the end. If you have any questions, just type them in, and then I'll go through them at the end. And we see doctors, for example, grabbing a personal PC, putting lots of healthcare data on it, and then having 10 people share the same login every day. So one person would log in the morning, 10 people would access healthcare data, there'd be no accountability, et cetera. And there was no, say, disk encryption on the laptop, et cetera, et cetera. And they were simply ignoring the cost of protecting data, meaning they weren't paying the cost of protecting data, meaning the data was not being protected. So you have to have clear corporate ownership of every asset. You have to have someone who's responsible from an organizational perspective. Now, it doesn't mean, when I say responsible, I don't mean they're actually doing the hands-on work. If you're a manager or a director, you may not be hands-on, but you make sure it happens. You delegate those roles. So everyone owns a system. All systems are owned. They're controlled. Your inventory, you minimize the attack surface, and you keep them current. And this is the DNA of what we're talking about. And I'll get into specific use cases very quickly, actually right now. So just to talk about how the game's changed as of last year. So it used to be, when malware hit a network, worms used to be what we call breeders, not warriors. They were dumb. They were good at spreading and not doing much else, like the Configure worm from about 10, 11 years ago now. MS-08067, that's every pen tester knows that patch, right, from 11 years ago. So MS-08067 was the last universal server-side flaw in Windows until, well, Eternal Blue you're looking at right here. And back then, if you were missing that patch and something like Configure got in, say you have 1,000 systems and one was missing the patch for MS-08067, excuse me. And what would happen is Configure would hit that one system, exploit it, and that was it. Your other 999 were fine. And what it would simply do is own that one system, exploit it, and then would fire that exploit off against the other 999 systems. It would fail to exploit them because they were patched, and that was the end of the story. And many of us, including myself back then, were like, wow, that's really dumb, because humans don't work that way. Human penetration testers don't fire off 1,000 exploits on 1,000 systems. I do pen testing as well, and that's not what I do. What I do is I fire off one exploit at one system, try to escalate my privileges if I need to say administrator or system, dump the usernames, dump the hashes, dump the plain text passwords using a tool called Mimikatz, steal credentials and move laterally through stolen credentials through, say, PSExec or WMIC or remote desktop. That's how pen testers move. So I might own 1,000 systems, and I'll use one exploit on one, steal credentials, and own the other 999 to my stolen credentials. That's what human penetrations have been doing for decades. Malware didn't really do that commonly until last year. And so what NotPetya did was it married the tools allegedly leaked from the NSA, married them to this very intelligent pivoting mechanism where it moved just like a human pen tester. Own one box, steal credentials, dump usernames, dump hashes, dump plain text passwords, log into other systems as a, quote, authorized user, at least stolen, authorized access, stolen access, and then move laterally through WMIC or PSExec and things like that, which, by the way, natively offer virtually no logging with default logging configuration on Windows. And in the end, one system unpatched, 1,000 go down, depending on how you've set up your authentication, things like that. And so we had NotPetya cause billions of dollars in damage. And very large companies, there's a pharmaceutical company based in the US who has suffered hundreds of millions of dollars in losses. They've had to triage the creation of medicines, including vaccines, because they were so heavily impacted by this malware. And so you now have the nightmare scenario of malware impacting health and human safety, because this large company for a period of time couldn't ship medicines. They had to triage how they were shipping medicines. And I think, now that standard's been set, that mold has been cast, I think we'll see a lot more malware doing this. We have seen a lot more malware doing this now. City of Atlanta got hit with SamSam. And so marrying these advanced attacks from allegedly leaked from the NSA with intelligent pivoting based on how humans pivot, and it's really changed the game in a meaningful and very negative way. And the old design of the candy bar design of a hardened perimeter and a software inside is simply failing wholesale. We need to move towards zero trust, or at least towards zero trust, to mitigate that threat. So we're going to look at it. Obviously, this is just a sampling of what 530 has, and it's a 6-day course with net wars and everything else, and a day 6 challenge. And so I'm just going to give you a sort of a best of highlight reel here. And if you think this is looks interesting to you, come check us out. So we'll talk about private VLANs, which to me is one of the simplest things you can do to largely to move the needle towards zero trust in a very meaningful way. We'll look at NetFlow, Darknet routing, other things like proxies. Let's dig in now. So usually my first suggestion for a client is this: private VLANs. Private VLANs offer the same functionality that some corporate style wireless solutions offer, which is called station isolation. Station isolation on a wireless network means clients can't talk to clients. Clients can only talk to the access point and things beyond the access point, like the internet or other servers. But you can't talk to other clients in the same wireless network. Now, at a hotel or a coffee shop, I very much want station isolation. There's no value add for me in hotel room 178 to have someone's PC in room 179 scanning me. There is zero value add. There's no need to talk to other PCs in a hotel, in a coffee shop, etc. So everyone pretty much agrees that wireless station isolation is a great idea. It removes entire swaths of attack surface off the table. Clients can't attack clients, which is great. They can only attack things beyond the access point, or the access point itself, I suppose, and things beyond the access point, such as servers or perhaps things on the internet. But in order to attack a system now, you have to route. Because normally on a switch or an access point, if I attack something else in that same switch, I'm not actually routing. I'm simply attacking something on the same switch as me. So if some client PC attacks some other client PC in a wireless network, most companies can't see that. You don't have intrusion detection systems on every switch or access point. You don't have IPSs. You might have that towards your core. You might have that on critical networks, but you probably don't have that on every client network. And so if one client affects another client, that's often invisible, at least from a network perspective. And so wireless station isolation, I think, is obviously a great idea in many, many environments. And all a private VLAN is the same thing for a wired network. That's all it is. Any commercial grade switch, such as a Cisco or a Juniper, anything like that, anything else like that, can easily do this. And what you do is you have to have some basic sane network segmentation. And the most basic level of network segmentation you require are server networks and client networks, right? So you put your servers, and now you can have a lot more segmentation than that, but if you want to have baby steps and start somewhere, put your servers on a server VLAN, put your clients on a client VLAN. Now you want to have at least 2 classes of clients: IT clients and regular clients. Regular clients can't talk to any other client. IT clients can talk to anyone. Why? Because they're administering systems, obviously, right? And so if you have IT clients and then regular client, non-IT clients, and you mark the non-IT client VLAN private, none of those PCs can talk to each other. And you just move the needle in a huge way towards zero trust with about a 10-line configuration change on the switches. It's simple. It's very simple to do. Now, obviously, you need to test, but this is built-in functionality. It's about a 10-line config change. 4 of my 5 clients, we turned it on, click, no one noticed, and it just worked. And now if you have 10,000 client PCs, say you have 50 IT PCs, 10,000 client PCs, and maybe 100 servers, let's say. Those 10,000 client PCs can't talk to each other. They can't attack each other. They can't infect each other. And this is stuff you probably already bought. This is a switch you already have or switches you already have. There's no additional cost for this. Now, you will get some resistance, probably. One thing I've noticed in IT is a lot of people in IT fight change. They'll fight almost every change you bring down the pike because it's just human nature to fight something that's different. And they think it's difficult, and it's not actually difficult. Your network engineers may complain, Eric, we have 10,000 client PCs. Are you suggesting 10,000 VLANs? No, I'm suggesting one VLAN. One VLAN. Only need one. You mark it private, and they can't talk to each other. They can only talk to the default gateway and things beyond it, right? That's it. Obviously, IT is going to be accepted from this because they're administering systems, right? And you can trunk private VLANs. It works very, very well. Are there any use cases where clients have to talk to clients? Usually not. Now, are there cases where clients do talk to clients? Sure. On a Windows network, especially NetBIOS broadcasts, that stuff happens all day long, but it's not actually required to operate. Windows 10 does have this quote delivery optimization mode for patching, which is optional, where basically PCs can send patches to PCs on a very ad hoc basis. I wouldn't recommend that for any kind of formal network anyways. You should have a patching server. That's more designed for like work groups and very informal things. I wouldn't recommend that anyways for company. Some audio video stuff goes peer-to-peer, but almost all of that, like the Cisco stuff, can go via a server. And there's a few use cases like that, but usually there's easy workarounds, right? And again, this largely hardens that network. Again, client PCs can't attack other client PCs. When I was describing some of these concepts to a pen tester I know, I went through about 4 or 5 things that I do for all my clients. And he looked at me, he said, I am so happy, Eric, that you don't work at the companies that I perform pen tests on, because you're killing me, man. You're just killing me with this stuff. So one of the things you want to look for as a defender and as a security architect, you want to look for these asymmetries. You want to look for controls that are easy to configure for the defender. You make the attacker's job much, much harder. So things that might take you minutes or a few hours with testing, which is all that we're looking at here in most cases. And now you're adding days or weeks to a pen tester's or malware's life, or it's simply failing. It's easy for you and it's hard for them. It's easy for the blue team and hard for the red. You should do those things. Use a search for those things. And those red-blue asymmetries, where the blue team has an easy time doing it and the red team's job is much, much harder, this speaks strongly to that. This is an old school thing I've been doing for a long time. Now, the term Darknet it's kind of been borrowed now. Darknet, often people talk about the dark web and things like, Tor. Darknets, that term predates that. And the original term for an IP darknet was simply IP space you owned but weren't using. And you can even use this for private networks, right? So you own, say, a number of Class C addresses. My last company, we owned 21 Class Cs, right? 21 public Class Cs. And internally now, in my last company, that hospital chain, we're only actually using 5 of them. So we're using 5 of the 16. They were contiguous, they were in order. And so 5 of the 16 we're using, and 5 of the 21 rather we're using, and other 16 we weren't using. So what I did was internally now, not on the internet, internally, I routed that traffic to a darknet router where I basically counted it and dropped it. Now, why are you routing unrouted traffic, Eric? Why would you do that? Well, how does malware work? Most malware, when it hits a PC, it scans things around them. It'll scan, if it's on 192.168.1.7, it'll scan 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and it'll go through 2.1 and 2.2 and 2.3 and 3.1 and 3. And it'll often scan networks. It'll scan PCs on the same network or IPs on the same network and IPs in nearby networks. And the thinking is, if I find another network that's contiguous with the network I'm on as malware, that network may be unfirewalled because it's behind that firewall, right? And so this even works for private addresses. If you're using 192.168.0.0 and 1.0 and 2.0, let's say, and you're ignoring 3.0, 4.0, 5.0, route that to a darknet router. And then either just count it there and drop it, or then forward it to a packet vacuum. Why? Because you'll see explosions in darknet traffic when something starts scanning. When something hits a network, say at 192.168.1.7, it'll often try to scan, again, the 2 network, the 3 network, the 4 network. And what you'll see is explosions of traffic to unrouted addresses, so formerly unrouted addresses. Now, on the internet, you'll have stuff hitting darknets all day long because that's the nature of the internet. But internally, this should be pretty unusual. You shouldn't see things scanning networks where you have nothing there, right? So behind your firewall, formerly unrouted traffic, route it to the darknet router, and you can just simply, count it there and drop it and monitor via SNMP, or even better, send it to a packet vacuum, something like Security Onion. And why would you want to do this? Well, I'll show you here. Sorry, and my PC's locked up momentarily. My slides are rather. So hopefully this will come back. One moment. All right, let's try this again. There we go. Sorry about that. And so here is Team Cumry detecting the Woody worm. And what you see sometime right before 5 a.m., you can see it right down there, the giant burst in traffic, right? And so I caught a big 5 accounting firm conducting a pen test this way at that same company I mentioned. So we had 21 Class Cs. We were using 5 of them behind, it's internally now. And the other 16 I had been ignoring. I routed them to a Darknet router, and we saw it. And I had my NOC watch this. And the NOC, we didn't have a full-time SOC. We had a 9-to-5 SOC, Security Operations Center. We had 24/7 NOC, but these folks were network operators. They're backup people. They're good, hardworking people, but they're not security people. And I told them, if you see a giant spike watch this graph, just put it on one of the monitors. If you see a big spike, you wake someone up. And sure enough, there's a giant spike, a 10-fold spike in traffic to Darknet router. And they woke up one of our incident handlers, and that was a big 5 accounting firm who had broken into one PC, ran an Nmap scan of the entire Class B, and they lit up my Darknet router. So this was, our fastest IDS for scanning. It could be an Nmap scan, a port scan. It could be any kind of scan that hits a lot of PCs. You'll see this, right? So you'll catch worms, you'll catch malware, you'll catch pen testers, you'll catch Nmap, you'll catch all kinds of good stuff, right? Moving on up the chain now, and basically 530, we secure layers 1 through 7 in order. And moving up to email now. Email is intensely dangerous. Most intrusions, probably north of 80%, begin with email. And it's an intensely dangerous thing to handle. When I tell my small, mid-sized clients is don't run your own mail server. You have to be really good at this. Now, if you're a big company or if you're a security-focused company, or there's also some appliances you can buy certainly to offload this. If you're one of those, fine, I understand you're running your own mail relay. But if you're a small, mid-sized company, you're better off outsourcing that because it's so intensely dangerous. Have someone like Microsoft handle it for you or Google handle it for you. There's a bunch of private providers out there. My company uses Google. You can buy Gmail for a private domain. And but if you do handle your own email, of course, you want to be very, very careful. And also, who can spoof your email? Because if someone's sending spoofed emails, some of the worst cases I've handled use cousin domains or lookalike domains. I saw a talk from an FBI agent 2 years ago at a SANS conference, and he was saying how there was a company in Nashville, Tennessee, and their accountants were johnsonaccounting.com. And the bad guys registered johnsonaccountant.com, right? So your CPA is Fred at johnsonaccounting.com. Now you're getting email from Fred at johnsonaccountant.com. Right? And they all kinds of fraud. They stole millions of dollars. You have to be very, very careful of these cousin domains and lookalike domains, and certainly who's authorized to send email from your actual domain. That's a very basic form of sanitization you need to perform here. You can use SPF for that. You can use DKIM for that. If you have outsourced your email, you want to make sure that you set these things up. You can set up SPF and DKIM, other things through Gmail and through Office 365, etc. So DNS Twist is now looking for these cousin domains. So we have SEC530.com, and someone went and registered SEC530.com. And all of a sudden, you're getting email from the CEO at SEC530.com, right? And you set up SPF for 530.com with a 0, but not obviously for 530 because you didn't buy that. Someone else bought that domain. I could easily miss that if I was rushing a bit on a given day. Would your employees catch that? And so what you want to do is have DNS Twist run on these things. As email and things come in, how similar are the domains to domains you actually own and registered? At a certain percentage of similarity, you want to alert or perhaps block, right? We'll talk about various forms of blocking and how it does not have to be a binary thing. But cousin domains and lookalike domains are used in some of the more the biggest. When it comes down to spear phishing, sometimes called whale hunting, when it's very, very tailored to your company as a targeted attack, an APT style targeted attack, we see these things happening. And most companies just fall prey to what johnsonaccounting.com is now johnsonaccountant.com, and your accountants don't notice that, and they're sending financials off to the bad guys. You want to be very, very careful with this, and DNS Twist can capture some of these lookalike domains, especially now that DNS supports beyond just ASCII. DNS supports Unicode, of course, now. And so you can have, a lowercase r, but it's not ASCII. It could be like Cyrillic or something. So it's a different character, but it's pixel by pixel, the same pixels. Your users won't notice that. I probably wouldn't notice that, but DNS Twist can definitely catch that. You need, again, identify your assets. You can go network-centric or data-centric. We actually look at it both ways. And, focus on the network pieces as we do in 530, but then look at the actual data. I always ask my clients, what data can't leave? What's your most sensitive data? What keeps you up at night? Where is it? Who owns it? And we work from that perspective. Now, there's a lot of great breakthroughs in IDSs lately, and of course, Snort is the granddaddy in all this stuff. We also have Bro and Suricata, and Suricata has really made some great leaps lately, and it's also created a lot of great competition with Snort as well, where there's been Suricata added a bunch of great features such as multi-threading and JSON reporting and things like that, and now Snort's actually adding similar features as well. It's great for everyone because we get to use these products. You can buy, you can use this stuff open source. You can buy Cisco Firepower, which is SourceFire, which is based on Snort. And so there's been a real kind of arms race in these IDSs, Bro, Suricata, and Snort. It's really hard to go wrong. And Suricata is great because it's multi-threaded, although Snort's now adding that. Some of the reporting now, they've moved beyond just flat logs. They've gone to JSON, which is great because you can export, import that stuff. Suricata can do things such as automatically carve files out of the network, automatically carve all PDFs, automatically carve all EXEs. Again, now Snort's playing catch up, adding those things too. So you can't go wrong with any of those products I mentioned. And again, Suricata is great, and they're really pushing the envelope on what you're doing on IDSs. I love Bro. Bro's fantastic. It can do a lot of the things I just mentioned previously, such as auto-carving files. Bro is really a language that describes packets. So I want to carve all PDFs to come across the wire. I want to carve all spreadsheets or anything with a macro or EXEs, or I want to look at all X509 certs or all files downloaded, on and on and on and on, all user agents for web traffic. And Bro's wonderful. It feeds into things like Security Onion and, of course, many, many other products. So metadata, such as, abnormal events, strange user agents, I looked at, the government funded me to look at ransomware about a year and a half ago. So I spent about 6 weeks in my office infecting myself with hundreds of strains of ransomware on obviously a clean network with snapshots and everything else. And I clicked yes on everything. I agreed to everything. I channeled my true inner user, and I infected myself hundreds of times. And they wanted to know, how do you detect this stuff? Prevent and detect, obviously. And I was actually surprised at how very blatant the most of the ransomware is in the network. It's not quiet at all. It's very, very loud, and a Windows 7 system infected with ransomware starts sending user agents that claim to be from a Windows 2000 server, So why does a Windows 7, because, Windows operating systems will announce the NT kernel version in the user agent string of, like, say, if you use, a browser on Windows, in the user agent string, it'll announce basically the NT kernel version. And obviously the NT kernel version for Windows 7, well, it happens to be Windows NT 6.1. And all of a sudden it's claiming a Windows 2000 user agent, obviously bogus. And so what I saw when I was looking at the ransomware, lots of it is notably bogus user agents, complete explosions in DNS resolutions. Like, it might try to resolve thousands and thousands of bad names. And, we have these things called domain generation algorithms, DGAs. Now, it used to be you had a domain, evildomain.com, and malware used evildomain.com, and then, of course, your reputation services would then blacklist evildomain.com. So now what the criminals do and the malware authors do is they'll generate a piece of malware will generate 50 domains through an algorithm every 4 hours or every 8 hours. So every 8 hours, it'll generate a new list of 50 domains, only one of which is live, only one of which is there. It'll try to resolve all 50, creating 49 failed resolutions and usually one successful. It'll find the one successful, connect to that. So why are they using 50 domains, but only actually one of them? Well, it's going to be very difficult to blacklist 50 domains every 8 hours, right? And so if they keep churning new domains every 8 hours, and they'll try to resolve 50, only one works, trying to blacklist all that stuff's going to fail. Reputation services are going to fall behind. So reputation services don't do a good job on domain generation algorithms, which modern malware is now using. And so, but it creates these explosions of failed lookups and broken catch that through DNS logs and things like that. It's pretty easy to pick up once you look at it. But most people don't log DNS. They don't look at DNS. They treat DNS like a utility, names resolving or names aren't resolving kind of a thing, All right. SSL inspections. One thing that comes up a lot, of course, is how we're increasingly blinded through encryption. And how do you handle that? Well, there's lots of tools that can actually decrypt SSL. Now, there are, of course, privacy aspects to this. If you're listening in Europe, the European privacy directives and other things can make this challenging. So make sure your lawyers agree and make sure your HR department agrees and your legal counsel and all that stuff. But there are tools, even open source tools like MITM proxy. You can do it for free. There were tools like Blue Coat, but ideally you do want to look at the SSL, decrypted SSL. And so what happens is if a system goes to an SSL proxy, it'll decrypt, it'll land the SSL session there, reinitiate a session on the other side, and then have the unexpected content in the middle. There's a bunch of work you have to do with certificates and trust and importing the certs. It works fairly well now. Again, there are some privacy issues, et cetera, but that does remove the blind spot. And again, even free tools, MITM proxy is a free tool we use. We have labs in 530. You can do this with open source tools now pretty well. And that removes that blind spot. Get your IDS back in the game, get your IPS back in the game. Ultimately, combination of that, if you can, and obviously falling back to the end host, because the end host, the client of the server, will see the decrypted content. So if you're concerned about this, as I think you should be, either you can inspect the SSL on the wire through tools like this, or inspect it on the end host, because the end host will see the normalized content. So one or both of those options is something you should be looking at. And this again gets your IDS back in the game. We call it an SSL decrypt mirror port. And so the SSL proxy not only proxies the SSL both to and from the device, it also sends those packets out, essentially the equivalent of a span port, not exactly a span port, but a similar thing. And now your IDS IPS is now back in the game. You could run the IPS right on the SSL proxy, putting it in line, or have an IDS offline, just like it would be normally. And now you have all the inspected, the plain text content. It's back in the game, and that can work very, very well. So one of the things I've learned from the hospitals especially is you have to hunt down data. You can ask people like, okay, your sensitive data, whether that's healthcare data or government data or financial data or whatever you happen to have. If you ask employees where they think it is, they usually don't know where all of it is, right? And so we have to go, threat hunting is very much in vogue now, going out hunting the threats. I like to hunt data, go through and hunt data, like find out where that data is. Like if someone were to, save healthcare data on an insecure server or an insecure place, what would that look like? Where would that be? And go find it. You can't assume it's not happening. You have to assume it's happening and hunt it down. Just like a threat hunter hunts down threats, you should hunt down data that's put in places where it shouldn't be. I learned this lesson in a healthcare environment when I looked for medical records outside my firewall. They may be the HIPAA security officer, and I put a IDS sensor outside the firewall looking for unencrypted medical transactions. It turns out the medical transactions have very unique transaction IDs that should never exist plain text outside my firewall. And I found thousands of records in the first hour. And after I picked myself up off the floor and I verified they were true positives, and they were, it wasn't an evil attacker, it was just mistakes. We had a couple of systems where the user made a mistake, they clicked the wrong button, or they didn't click the right button, or someone was misguided. It was simply mistakes. And we call that layer 8, by the way, not an official OSI model layer. Layer 8 is the person making a mistake. But you have to make your systems more resilient against that, because people will make mistakes. It's human nature. And so I learned then, if you have a policy saying medical data must be encrypted on the internet, or banking data, or whatever it is, you can write the policy, you can feel good about the policy, you can tell your users about that policy, you can enforce the policy, but you have to verify it's actually happening or not, and then hunt. So hunt for data. Hunt for unencrypted data where it shouldn't be. Hunt for data in databases where it shouldn't be. Hunt for data on file servers or storage area networks in areas where it shouldn't be. And I've learned, and I've had a lot of clients, we always find data where it shouldn't be. People, again, like to ignore the cost of protecting data, meaning they're not protecting the data. And it's a casual thing they're doing. They're making mistakes. They're not intentionally trying to harm your company, but they're introducing tremendous risk to your company by simply treating data too casually. So here's something that Justin came up with. He hunts every row and every column for data. Here he's looking for credit cards. So he goes to a database, an Azure database, and he looks through every row and every column and every field of every database table and the entire database server looking for what could be credit cards. And you might think, hey, our credit card data is stored right here on this table only. Well, you believe that, and that may be true, but I wouldn't consider that true until I hunt it. And so searching every row and every table and every field of every database table and entire database looking for certain things, whether it's credit cards, whether it's healthcare transaction IDs, whether it's bank accounts, and the US Social Security numbers, things like that, or passport numbers or whatever, hunt that stuff down. Obviously, you want to have permission from HR, et cetera, because you can end up seeing sensitive data this way. But anytime we've gone through exercises like that, we find this type of data. We find it almost every time. And you talk to the user, they made a mistake, or they didn't know, they didn't understand. And that's human nature. But again, you have to plan for human nature, and you have to build your systems to be more resilient to human nature. There's a terrible plane crash in the US a few months ago. And an engine exploded, and it tore open a window, and a person got killed, and it was tragic and it was awful. But someone on social media took a picture when the air masks fall down, the oxygen masks, and they took a picture, and everyone had their oxygen in the picture. Everyone had the oxygen mask below their nose, so their nose was not in the mask. And a lot of people on social media were like, hey, you should listen to the pre-flight thing. I'm like, how about you design a better system? Because the oxygen masks look like little cups that were round on this plane anyways. So if it's a round cup, you'll probably put it over your mouth. But if it's a cup with a little notch where the nose clearly goes, you're more likely to put it over your nose, right? And these cups, oxygen masks, were just round cups. They look like a cup you might drink, water out of. There was no little notch bridge where the nose should go. And so sure, you should listen to pre-flight video and you should watch all that, you should pay attention, but we should build better systems. Those masks should have little notches, that way someone's much more likely to use it properly. So yes, write policy, train your users, make them aware, but ultimately also build better systems. We've been telling users to make better passwords for decades now, and it just failed. So we need to build better systems. This is a neat trick that Justin came up with. I didn't realize that PowerShell can read images natively. It can do OCR as a built-in command. Wow, I had no idea. So what if you have sensitive data in images or PDFs? Plenty of PDFs have sensitive data, right? You fill out all kinds of forms in PDF form. So what if you have sensitive data such as credit card numbers or passport numbers or whatever, but it's in an image? How do you find that? There's many commercial tools that can do that. I'm sure you could do this on Linux or Unix, but built-in functionality to PowerShell, boom. You see the whole thing right there. Now, I read it as 5.3 capital O, SEC530. It got that fake social security number correct, but that's pretty powerful. So now you can script things. You can search your databases for data and database tables. You can search images for certain data and go hunting for that sensitive data. And again, every time we've performed steps like this, we found stuff. I don't think we've ever failed to find something interesting. And I'll give credit where it's due, PowerShell. I'm an old school Linux, Unix guy, but man, it is powerful stuff. I've been learning as much PowerShell as I possibly can. I'm actually going to be at DerbyCon. If you're there, say hi. I'm going to be at DerbyCon next month, taking Carlos Perez's PowerShell class because I want to learn more PowerShell. So I'm learning a lot. It's different than Linux. Pipes pass objects, not text, and that hurt my brain for a long time, but I think I'm mostly there. But PowerShell is powerful, and someone in your company, if you're a Windows shop, of course, should be hopefully doing things like this in PowerShell. So zero trust, I talked about it, and this is the old outside untrusted, inside trusted. We have to go away, and we can assign a trust score, and it doesn't have to be binary. It doesn't have to be 1 or a 0. Maybe the PC's inside, that's plus 10 points. You log in with dual factor, another 10 points, et cetera. And then at a certain trust score or points, you get more access or less. So zero trust says the network's always hostile inside or out. There's always going to be both internal and external threats. And simply being on the network, internal network, is not enough to mean fully trusted. It can be partially trusted, but not fully trusted. And you have to verify every device, log and inspect all traffic. Now, again, don't let perfect get in the way of good. If you see this and think that's impossible at my company, we'll never get there in 10 years, okay, take steps towards it, okay? Because my last company, we wouldn't have gotten there in 10 years. At hospital chain, it was a nonprofit, understaffed. We could do private VLANs. We could do lots of things. We couldn't do all of it. We could do a lot of it, okay? But so don't let perfect get in the way of good. If this seems impossible, do what you can. And a private VLAN is a big step towards that, at least for the clients. One awesome trick, I picked this up from Jason Fossen from 505, is Windows servers, certainly, and many of the clients support IPsec. And if you turn on mandatory IPsec on, say, a server network, it's easier on servers to get started. As a pen tester or as malware, I can't do a port scan without negotiating IPsec. I literally can't send a single packet or get a single packet responded to. Like if I send a SYN, there's no SYN-ACK back unless I negotiate IPsec. And often on Windows server clusters, it's a few configuration changes, click, 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 and you're done. Like if you have a multi-tier web architecture where users are talking to a Windows web server, and that Windows web server is talking to other servers, such as database servers on the backside, you turn on a mandatory IPsec on the backside. And now all those servers are now in this kind of invisibility shield, and users can surf to the web server, they can't see anything past it unless they negotiate IPsec. You can also, of course, do IPsec on the clients, but that's usually a harder lift. Certainly a good goal. But if you turn on mandatory IPsec, at least to begin on the servers, no pen tester, no malware can connect to any ports until they first negotiate IPsec. This is built-in functionality. So it may be a few configuration changes, maybe a half an hour or an hour of testing or configuration, and then more testing, and then boom. And again, this is one of those red-blue asymmetries. You're making the job very difficult for the red team, and it's fairly straightforward for the blue team to pull off. It also speaks strongly to zero trust, and it's built-in functionality on a Windows network you already own. So let's talk about earlier, variable trust. So it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So like maybe, okay, you're on the inside of that network. You're on an internal network, you get 10 points. And then, okay, you also authenticated with dual factor authentication, 10 more points. And your PC is fully patched, 10 more points. And your antivirus is up to date, 10 more points, etc. So maybe being on the internal network only gets you access to some less sensitive things, but not a sensitive database such as PCI. You want to access PCI, which is payment card industry, that requires dual factor authentication, encrypted connection, up-to-date antivirus, fully patched, right? If you don't have those four things, you get less access, and maybe no access to PCI. So get away from these binary 1 and 0 decisions and move more towards a granular approach. Sorry, I just didn't mean to do that. There you go. All right. Sorry, I had to reshare again. Once in a while, it gets stuck, but I think we're almost there. There we go. All right. So right about on time, yeah, 10:48. So that's what I want to cover today. If you're going to be in Singapore or Sydney, October, November, I'd love to see you there. And you get an idea about what 530 is like. We're taking it all around the world. It's going to be running about 25 times next year. So we don't catch you this time, we'll catch you next time. And I'll see if there's any questions. In the meantime, thank you for coming to my talk. And let's see if there's any questions. I don't know, Ruby, let me know if you're seeing any questions. I don't see any currently, but I might not be seeing them. So let me know if you see them.
It seems like there were some comments during the talk, and one specific question: does PVLANs affect functionality of, for example, Apple Home devices that require registration / pairing via another wireless device?
Sure, that's a great example actually. Yeah, so wireless stuff can be tricky, like your home network. Because if you think about your home, that's a great question, by the way. A home network often intermingles clients and servers, right? Because your Apple devices, like your Apple TV, your Roku, those are servers, right? And so you're exactly right. If you had a private VLAN for devices like that, devices on the private VLAN couldn't talk to those devices. But what I would say for those devices on a home network, private VLAN might not be a good fit for that exact reason. Great point. But ultimately, if those are servers on a more formal network, put them on a server VLAN, and then it'll all work fine. So if it is a server and an Apple TV is a server, things like that are servers, simply put them on a server VLAN or a non-private VLAN, and then you can still manage them all day long. But that's a great example. Thank you. Any other questions, Ruby? Or anyone
Uh,
else?
we have what about TLS 1.3? I thought TLS 1.3 does not allow MITM.
We're still working on that. Great. So TLS 1.3, does that allow MITM? TLS 1.3 just came out. It was finalized, about a month ago now? And we're working on that right now. I've talked to some people who claim it is possible. Now, to be fair, it's only been about a month out now. I haven't done it hands-on. So it's a great point. We're working on that now, but I believe it should be possible, but TBD. Great point.
And then let's see. Do you suggest any specific framework for security architecture?
Specific framework for security architecture. Well, yeah, sure. Zero Trust is the framework. That's by Forrester. There's a great book called Zero Trust Networks. If you just Google Zero Trust Networks, you'll see it. It's a really, really good book. That's the first book I'll recommend. In fact, I can probably pull it up here while I'm still sharing here. Zero Trust Networks, if you can still see this. Yeah, here it is. So it's Zero Trust Networks right there. It's by O'Reilly. And just Google Zero Trust Networks. Here it is here. Zero Trust Networks by O'Reilly. There it is right there. That's a great, 530 is good too, obviously, but that's a really, really good starting point. Great question, by the way.
And then is there any best practice of wireless defensive framework?
Wireless defensive front. Well, sure, there's stuff out there. 530 talks about wireless a little bit. We have a section. SANS has a whole class on 617 on wireless on wireless everything. So we talk about wireless for maybe an hour. We cover the high notes, etc. But 617 is a good place to go for that. That's SANS's wireless class.
Next question: how can we address BYOD devices and also IoT devices in the corporate network, zero trust or private VLANs?
Sure, all that. We actually have, we talk about some of the new abilities that iOS, Apple has an ability they're almost like containers on your phone, and you have an ability to have, it's similar to a container on your phone where you can have, corporate and, it's your personal device, but there's a container style thing on the phone. Both iOS has that, Android has that now, where you can keep all the corporate stuff in an encrypted, essentially, container on the phone. So the answer is yes to both of those, and especially for the phones themselves, that's a good solution. There's a number of solutions out there, but basically have an encrypted container on the phone that limits all your corporate email inside that container and allows you to remotely destroy the container, etc., things like that. So most users don't want to carry two phones, obviously. They want to carry one phone. And in most environments, you'll have personal use on a corporate device or vice versa. And those solutions are solid solutions. We covered them in 530.
Okay, now I think it's the last question. Do we have similar functionality on private VLAN on Windows Global Security Policy? Because configuring PVLANs on switches can cause reachability issues.
Sure. Ultimately, that's a great point. I don't want clients talking to clients is my goal. Whether you do that at layer 2 with VLANs or do that, say, with a firewall on Windows, I'm happy as long as you do it. So if your environment, usually for my clients, private VLANs are easier to configure than firewalls. But if you want to have the Windows firewall forbid most clients from talking to most clients, allow IT clients to connect, etc., that's fine. So ultimately, if you look broadly at this, I want to prevent average clients talking to clients. Whether you do that layer 2 with VLANs or do that with a firewall through Windows, as long as you do it, I'm happy.
Okay, looks like one last question. What is the
Sure.
best way to integrate mobile device management solution to enhance enterprise security posture?
That's a big question. We have a whole mobile class on that too. You guys keep asking for other classes, which is awesome. That's a whole nother webcast. Like I said, begin with those containers on your phone to separate the corporate stuff, but we could go on for hours on that. So I guess I'll leave it at that.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much, Eric, for the great presentation and for bringing this content to the SANS community. To our audience, we greatly appreciate you listening in and your questions. For a schedule of all upcoming and archived SANS webcasts, visit sans.org/webcasts. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact us at asiapacific@sans.org. If you have any questions for Eric, you can also email us at that address and we will get the question to him. Until next time, take care, and we hope to have you back again for the next SANS APAC webcast. Thanks again, Eric.
Thank you, Ruby. Thanks, folks.